Hello everyone. Lately I've been trying to catch up on some TV shows that I've been meaning to watch and just haven't gotten around to checking out because I don't do a whole lot of streaming, but especially now that some stuff is coming out physically that wasn't before, especially The Mandalorian seasons 1 and 2, I wanted to check out a few more of those shows, especially Disney Plus type stuff, just to see if it was something that I liked or not. And one of the main things, speaking of The Mandalorian, was catching up on some of the Star Wars stuff, because I had not, at the time those first two seasons have come out on Blu-ray, seen The Mandalorian Season 3 or the Book of Boba Fett. I had not watched either of those yet. And rewatched Seasons 1 and 2 of The Mandalorian on Blu-ray and all the great special features, and just love those first two seasons. Then I went ahead and watched the Book of Boba Fett. And the whole thing, one thing I dislike about a lot of these shared universe TV shows, Marvel and Star Wars especially, is how much you have to watch like 5 different things to watch one thing. Everything's so interconnected, and that's part of why I haven't watched quite as many. Like at first, I knew that there was some stuff going into Boba Fett that was you should watch before going to Mandalorian Season 3, but I didn't realize how the Book of Boba Fett is basically the Mandalorian Season 3, and Mandalorian Season 3 it's kind of Season 4. Like, it's mandatory to watch the Book of Boba Fett before going to Mandalorian Season 3, or you're going to be lost in the very first episode. Like, what the heck, how are these two characters back together? I wasn't expecting that level of integration, to the point where there were a couple episodes in that show that Boba Fett, it wasn't a Boba Fett episode. It was literally just the next chapter of the story of the Mandalorian series. I was like, okay, it felt very, very odd how it's a necessary requirement to see that show. But anyway, Book of Boba Fett, I really enjoyed. I heard some mixed reviews. The only thing about it, though, that I didn't quite like, one, again, like I mentioned, how there's a little too much Mandalorian, not as quite as much Boba in parts, and I wasn't quite sold on the cybernetic teen biker gang characters. It wasn't like that they were terrible or a distraction. They're just it seemed a little too goofy. But on the whole, I really liked what it was, getting into the story of Boba Fett, and I loved his time with the Sand People, getting into that culture and seeing him get to that point where we see him claiming Jabba's throne. I loved that stuff. That was probably my favorite, that stuff in the beginning, and I loved that slower pace kind of cultural exploration element, and I enjoyed the difference in tone in Boba Fett's story versus Din Djarin's story, and I like that, how it fit that character more. So overall, I thought it was a fun series. I really enjoyed the Book of Boba Fett. And then leading into The Mandalorian Season 3, which I was a little more mixed on. And for me, the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian are probably my favorite Star Wars thing since the original trilogy. I think they're great. Season 3 I really enjoyed, but not quite as much as 1 and 2. And I couldn't quite put my finger on why. Like, I was liking it. And I'll talk about the very end of the series, how much more I enjoyed that. But for the majority of Season 3, I was liking it, but not as much as 1 and 2. And I think 2 elements contributed to that. One was that a lot of the story elements in Season 3 took more stuff from the prequel movies, which made sense for those things to be integrated into this point of, the story in this universe. But at the same time, I'd like the prequel movies a whole lot less than a lot of the stuff of the original trilogy. And one thing is that kind of sleek, shiny, very kind of almost cartoonish CGI look to the prequel series that I think was a little more prevalent than the gritty realism of Seasons 1 and 2 of The Mandalorian, which was more like the original trilogy. So that was probably why I wasn't quite as invested, but it did again make sense that those story elements were there, and they were, I think, utilized well. And the other thing was, there seemed to be a couple of points where we took little side trips. We were pulled out of the main quests that we were seeing with Grogu and Bo-Katan and Din Djarin. Like, I didn't really get heavily invested in some of that side character stuff, especially the scientist who we saw working on Moff Gideon's cruiser with the cloning experiments and with Grogu, there was a big kind of, it felt almost like a filler episode because I liked, again, exploring the different sides of the reality of the New Republic, and while I appreciate seeing that perspective, I just thought it was done in a way and with a character that I didn't care that much about, and it felt like when you have these modern TV series where you're looking at maybe 8 episodes versus an older show, which is 20 something, having that felt more of a distraction, a filler. I feel like if this was a kind of like an older TV show where that was just 1 or 2 episodes out of 20, I would have enjoyed it much more and appreciated getting that different perspective. But when these shows are so limited in the amount of story they're telling in a season, it felt like an unnecessary distraction for me. So those were the couple of things I didn't like, but I have to say that towards the very end, in the retaking of Mandalore, I loved, I guess the last 2 episodes roughly were probably my favorite of that season, and I thought were fantastic and really up to the level of quality of the first 2 seasons. So I liked how that turned out. I loved the very ending of the season, and I'm looking forward to more and where they're going to take it. And I love the evolution of Grogu as a character, spoiling as little as possible in these reviews, talking very vaguely about stuff, just give my general impressions. I do really like where they're taking him. And then the last of the Star Wars things that I caught up on, I still have to watch Andor. I haven't checked that one out, but I did watch Ahsoka, and this is one of those cases where I couldn't really get into it. I couldn't really enjoy it, not because of a lack of quality, but because I wasn't really a show for me. I wasn't really the audience for it. What was there was good, and I understand why a lot of people would like it, and it just wasn't quite meant for me because I'd never seen the Star Wars Rebels TV series, the animated series. I've only seen a handful of episodes of the Clone War animated series, and not that big of a Star Wars person outside of those original 3 movies and a sort of chain of books, with starting with Timothy Zahn's look at the Thrawn trilogy, and there's this continuation off of those first 3 movies leading up to around the time episode 1 came out, and then from that point I kind of dropped off, didn't read anymore. But that's kind of the Star Wars that I have experienced and enjoyed, not really a lot outside of there. I'm not a massive franchise fan, so this wasn't a series that clicked with me because I wasn't very aware of any of these characters. It was very much a direct continuation of a lot of that stuff, and I think if you watched those shows and got into this, seeing these live action interpretations was probably awesome, and it seemed like a good show, and I enjoyed it for what it was, but it wasn't something, again, that really clicked with me because I wasn't familiar with those characters, and it wasn't something I'd rewatch ever again. So it was good, just not for me. And then it was a bit of the opposite effect with the Obi-Wan series. I watched that as well, where I was very interested in the series, and I didn't think it was very good. I think there were a lot of writing issues with it, and it just didn't feel like as high of a quality of show as some of the other ones. And some of the stuff that I did really like, though, was when you got into the emotional state of Obi-Wan at this point in his life, and the relationship with him and Anakin, and some of the flashback stuff working their way into the modern day stuff, and I liked some of those elements, but otherwise I don't know, it just didn't feel like as good of a show. And him going on that adventure with young Leia, trying to do that sort of father figure with a young kid story structure that seems very popular in shows right now, it just didn't. She was fine. I liked her as a young Leia. It worked, but I just didn't feel like it was a story. It didn't have to be Leia. I felt weird that it was Leia, and it didn't connect well. And I felt like it was distracted from where I think the emotional heart of where Obi-Wan is at this point. I don't know. It just didn't work for me. So that was just not. I didn't think it was a very good show, which was disappointing because one thing that was good about it was Ewan McGregor was fantastic in it, and as Obi-Wan and recapturing that character, and I thought he did a great job. So it's sad to see. I felt like a great performance was wasted on a mediocre show. And the last thing I caught up on was not Star Wars related. We re-signed up for Netflix, which we haven't had in a while, because there were a few things coming this year that we wanted to check out. Wednesday Season 2, probably. Star Trek Prodigy is coming on to Netflix. The rights and continuation for that series was sold over there, so Season 2 of that is going to be coming out. There are a few things that were like, alright, we'll have Netflix for a little while. And one of the other big things was we really wanted to see that live-action Yu Yu Hakusho show, because we were both big fans of Yu Yu Hakusho. I've always really enjoyed it. It's my wife's favorite anime ever. So as a couple, we were both, this is a household that loves Yu Yu Hakusho, so we got to check it out. And a lot of those live-action anime adaptations have not been very good, so we're a little, I don't know, and we were both very pleasantly surprised. It wasn't perfect. There are a couple things I'll mention that were disappointing, but I understand within the modern TV realm why it was like that. But overall, our impressions were very positive. I thought it was a really good translation of the anime to live action. I think a lot of the casting choices were fantastic. We both loved Kuwabara the best. I thought he was the best translation of the anime to live action. It was great, but in general, I think everyone was pretty good. Hiei was a little on the weaker side. Kurama was pretty good. Yusuke I thought was fantastic. Botan, there were a lot of these characters that I thought worked very well. Keiko. So I think overall it was a good translation, and one thing that was impressive and disappointing at the same time, it's only 5 episodes, 5 hour-long, roughly, episodes, and they cover something like 60 episodes, story-wise, of the anime in those 5 episodes, because they integrate a lot of the plots of Season 1 with ending sort of at the end of the Dark Tournament. They kind of skip the whole Dark Tournament and put it more into, they skip, obviously a lot of things like the Saint Beast and stuff, and a lot of the actual investigative, spirit detective things. There's a little bit there, but they skip the whole Dark Tournament and kind of combine the ending with that fight with Toguro when they're looking for Yukina in the mansion, and that first fight with Toguro. They kind of put that all together and make a much more truncated version, an abridged version of that story. And I think they did a good job, though, taking that much story content and rewriting it in a way that still tells a complete story only in 5 episodes. I think they did a good job, but at the same time it's also very disappointing to not have this huge, basically a quarter of the series story-wise is going to be completely missing, even if we get more of the show, unless they, I don't know, somehow have a Dark Tournament outside it. I don't think I think it'll go right into probably Sensui if we get another season. So overall, though, we were pretty impressed. Visually, I thought it worked well. It's very hard to translate that style of shonen action, anime into live action. Thought that was good. The one part that was a little weak was the music, especially compared to some of the great rousing music in the original anime. It felt a little weak, but it was okay. It wasn't bad. I don't think there's anything that I felt was truly bad about it. So overall, we were both pretty impressed. It's the kind of show that I would actually like to see it continue. I'd love to see more, and I think we would buy it if it came out physically, because we were surprised how much we enjoyed it. We actually went through and watched the whole thing in one day, which is a very rare occurrence for us. So overall, we both liked it. So that's what I've been catching up on as far as streaming shows, more current stuff. I'd love to hear what you think of the shows that I talked about, and if there's anything that's pretty current that you've been watching that you think I should check out. I know there's so much out there. I'd love to hear your suggestions.